It's the week ending Saturday, the 20th of May, and this is The Week Unwrapped. In the past 7 days, we've seen manifesto launches for the Conservatives, Labour and Lib Dem parties, a special counsel appointed to investigate President Trump's links to Russia, and a ransomware attack on over 100 countries, as well as British hospitals. But we're here to bring you some of the stories that passed under the radar this week. Big news not making headlines right now, but with repercussions for all our lives. I'm Olly Mann, and let's unwrap the week. And with me today from the week's digital team are Jonathan Harwood, Arion McNicoll and Elizabeth Carr-Ellis. And starting the show with her top pick of the week, it is Elizabeth. What have you brought us?
If you have a dream, you only have to ask these days.
Hey guys, I'm Fiona Seydu. I'm 21 years old and I'm from London. I'm currently in my final year studying experimental psychology at the University of Oxford. The purpose of this campaign is to raise $12,000 to cover the funds for my master's course at Harwood Graduate School of Education, studying human development and psychology starting this August. Human development and psychology is about understanding how to improve the psychological development of individuals. I'm particularly interested in the psychological development of people from ethnic minorities and working class backgrounds. I want to help young people to understand how to be more self-aware and motivated to achieve their ambition.
It's the funkiest sounding UCAS form ever from Fiona Seydu launching her crowdfunding campaign to get to Harvard. And Elizabeth, she reached her goal really quickly, didn't she? Why?
She did, because Stormzy, the grime artist, who I didn't know until this week...
There's so many more footnotes we could do in a week style about Stormzy. Hold on to those, chaps. I'd like one each.
But yeah, he was asked to retweet her crowdfunding appeal, which he kindly did, and then threw in $9,000 towards it too. So basically, she reached her £12,000 appeal in 24 hours.
Which is really impressive, actually, because... on the rare occasion that I'm asked to retweet charitable campaigns, I sort of feel like I've done an incredible duty for humanity just by pressing retweet. The idea of actually, contributing myself to some plebs campaign wouldn't even occur to me.
It is really nice, but why should anybody have to crowdfund this woman's education in the first place? Why does she have to
We have a talking point, folks.
We have a talking point.
Well, she is going to America. So, I mean, I understand what you're saying if she was crowdfunding to pursue a PhD at Oxford where she's studying. But
people do crowdfund to do PhDs at Oxford. 2 years ago, 2014 actually, another Oxford University student also did a crowdfunding appeal for $24,000 to get her master's. She wanted to do her master's. And I think it was 24,000 she needed to raise. What was interesting was she got called basically a posh scrounger for doing it then.
So I guess your argument is if you look back 30 years, this would have been obviously technologically implausible, but actually the idea of going to anyone apart from the government or the universities and saying, I want to carry on my studies, give me money, would have been completely ridiculous.
It would have been, but what's impressed me most with this is how quickly crowdfunding has become a thing that we just take and accept, and how much it's being used now. It's not only students who are using it for university, which is a very noble thing, but I think it's something the government should be funding. For example, last year a woman did a crowdfund because she wanted to take her kids to Disney World, and she achieved the money. Badminton players are now crowdfunding to get them to Tokyo in 2020.
But actually, I mean, the example of Disney World, isn't that that's quite a good example? That you wouldn't seriously expect the government to pay someone to go to Disney World on a holiday, so this is a new way for people to get money, isn't it?
Why didn't she save up and do it? Or, her kids can't go to Disney World. I've never been to Disney World.
I love this. You're simultaneously being socialist and conservative here. Jonathan, where do you stand on this? Crowdfunding.
I think with the Stormzy thing, it's quite interesting. I mean, the fact that this girl came from the same part of London as he does, and also she's doing a sort of progressive subject at Harvard, obviously helped her cause. Now, academically, there might be someone else come from Birmingham doing something that's about physics. They're not going to attract Stormzy in the same way. So is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, that is crowdfunding all over, isn't it, Arion? I mean, that's the danger. People contribute to people who make flashy videos with cool soundtracks or look appealing or make a good case in a soundbite. They're not necessarily the most worthy recipients.
Or they're just funny, like the crowdfunding campaign for a guy in 2012 to make a potato salad, and he wanted to raise $10, and he ended up raising 55,000 because people could really get behind that cause, and that was a cause that everyone could believe in. So yes, of course, there is that question of whether your campaign resonates with people for the right reasons. I suppose the other question that we're talking about is why celebrities are getting involved in this kind of charitable work, and it is often to get their name out in the press. It's probably no coincidence at all that Stormzy happens to be touring Gang Signs and Prayer, his number one album.
That's our second footnote, folks. Number one album, grime artist. Let's see if we can get a third one in.
I think, though, he did make the donation under his original name, so it wasn't from Stormzy.
And what's his original name? This would be the third footnote if you can do it.
Michael Amari.
There we go. 3 footnotes from the week team, everyone. you know all you need to know about Stormzy.
Well, that's right. And there was a kind of cack-handed play at anonymity where he made the pledge under his own name, then turned it anonymous, and then his agent went out and said, actually, yes, it was Stormzy after all. So evidently he was trying to get a bit of attention to himself as well as this very good cause.
But he was contacted through Twitter, and he did not just, as I said earlier, propagate the link, but decide to contribute personally. He didn't have to do that.
No, he didn't. But if you had £5 million, I wonder if you might be more inclined to to give a bit more.
It isn't usually people with a lot of money who get involved. It's people who give £10 here and £10 there that are sort of the bedrock of the system, I think. Whereas the actual real investors, they want something back. They don't want a signed print and a thank you letter that you get for giving 20 quid to some project. They want 5% stake. It's more like Dragon's Den, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So the crowdfunding is almost, I'm not going to say exploitative, that's far too harsh, but in a way, if you are really capable of backing something, you're going to want something back from them rather than just give them a tenner and get a pat on the back for it.
Oh, well, I suppose what you get back for this is you are funding an education that you believe in. You believe in her research as well as her as an individual. And Elizabeth, I do return to my original question. Okay, you came back very quickly and said, well, you get people crowdfunding to study at Oxford as well. But she is choosing to go to Harvard. That's always cost lots of money. America does have an education system where you have to pay a lot of money to be educated. That's not about us paying taxes here or inequality here.
She could study here, I suppose, if there was a course that was similar. What gets me is, I think it's more an example of how people just ask now. They expect it straight away almost. It's another form of that. And she's using crowdfunding.
It's okay to ask. People didn't have to give her any money. It was a very politely stated appeal, you know.
What's wrong with working for it? So she can't do it now. Why can't she do a few years' work and then come back?
How much was she raising? Do we know?
Like 60,000 or something.
60,000. It's going to take quite a few years,
yeah,
isn't it?
she'd got grants and educational aid.
Okay.
There was scholarships that have paid the majority.
Well,
she just needed to raise 12,000.
Okay, but those offers wouldn't have hung around if she'd taken 2 years to decide to go and work and raise the money herself. When she came back, the scholarships probably would have expired. So I guess she had a time frame she had to operate within.
Is your concern that it actually takes money away from more deserving causes that would traditionally benefit from philanthropy? So in other words, people who are giving money to her maybe not be giving money to children in need or whatever.
My worry is there is only a small pot of money that people can give. It's getting more and more where you're being asked to give for things which are just normal. And sometimes you just have to learn that you can't have what you want. You have to live with that. That's life. And instead, you can just crowdfund it now and go to Disney World.
Even councils are getting involved in it as well. I mean, public sector are using crowdfunding to raise money for small grants and things. I think in Plymouth there's a system where local businesses crowdfund, and if they reach a certain point, then the council comes in and backs them as well. And therefore, the council already has the £20,000 which guarantees its success before it gets involved, which means it's not taking any risk.
Is that necessarily a problem? In a Cameroonian way, that's big society, isn't it? Wasn't that the whole point? Was actually we're reaching a situation where why should government from top down decide who gets the money? Why not actually let people say what they want to support and then government can chip in as well?
I've got issues with that.
We already pay taxes. I pay all my taxes to the government. I pay all my taxes to the local government. Now I'm being asked to support local schemes, which really the local government should be doing. But because central government is taking their funding away. Since central government
has, in their words, brought the deficit down by making budgets smaller, isn't it more democratic for the people to support projects and then they can see whether they're valid rather than just someone in local government saying, yeah, let's give money to them?
But I think there's a philosophical problem at the heart of it, which is sort of the idea of pick and choose taxation.
Yeah.
Which means that you then decide, well, hang on, I'm paying all my income tax and some of it's going on, refugees. But whereas if I do it all through crowdfunding, I get to spend my money on what I want it to be be spent on. And then people develop this fundamental mistrust of giving money to the government per se, which is no good for anyone.
And I think that idea of being able to rest on philanthropy puts the onus on individuals to choose entirely whimsically where they want to spend their cash. So, Stormzy can support a bit of higher education this week and a bit of malarial, medical research the next week. But if funding is coming from the government to good causes, then we know it's traceable. And en masse we can decide where we want to spend our cash, not just handing it over to billionaires and celebrities and asking them to put their money wherever they please.
It's not just that. What people choose they want to do isn't necessarily what's the best use of those resources.
But it's up to the people who are contributing to the crowdfunding campaign to decide whether it's a noble use of those resources, isn't it? I mean, isn't it not that different to the way that the Week pays for itself? Okay, there's advertising, but you're a subscription model, basically, aren't you? People subscribe to the magazine, it comes to their door, they pay for it because they want it, it's not for the public good. Sure, they choose to receive it because they benefit from it.
Absolutely, but that doesn't mean that we don't also support the BBC and its existence, which is able to fund a much broader kind of journalism and a much broader kind of entertainment than any individual private company is able to do individually. So the two can coexist, perhaps, but...
Yeah, but Elizabeth claims not. Elizabeth wants crowdfunding killed off for any public good project.
I don't want that at all. What I want is for your taxes to pay for what's important in your community, not for people to pick and choose. Higher education, local community centres, for example. These should not be for which community has the most money to be able to crowdfund them.
OK. Arion, you're next. What do you think this week will be remembered for?
So there was evidence this week that the United States may genuinely be the land of the second chance.
I'm very excited about Chelsea's release. She was convicted of crimes that I don't believe she committed, and her whole prosecution was unfair. Plus, she spent 11 months in a horrendous solitary confinement at Quantico. Chelsea wants very much to be a productive citizen, to help people, and I know that she will. She has shown great courage, and I believe we can expect great things from her in the future.
Nancy Hollander there, Chelsea Manning's attorney, talking to The Guardian. So, Arion, Chelsea Manning was guilty of espionage, pardoned by the last president. Why is her release this week significant?
So yes, at 2 a.m. on Wednesday morning, Chelsea Manning walked out of the gates of the military prison in Fort Leavenworth in Kansas. And it brings to an end a pretty controversial case that, depending on which side you fall, is either a great moment of whistleblowing by a private citizen or an act of treason against the military. So it really does depend what your perspective is. And for many people, the sentence itself was very extreme. She was given 35 years, which is 10 times more than anybody has ever served for leaking top secret documents in the past. Even though she only served 7 years of that sentence, it's still a massive jail term versus anyone else who's done a similar crime.
OK, but if we're looking at the significance of it now, as opposed to when the crime was committed, as you say, 7-8 years ago, what is significant about this moment that you would say this is the story of the week? It's got to be, hasn't it, the impact that it has on future whistleblowers, because we're going to see more and more of them. The technology has made it easier than ever before. The precedents are set now in a way that it wasn't when Chelsea, then Bradley Manning, leaked those documents. So what is the significance now? Is this going to put off whistleblowers, do you think?
I think that was certainly the US government's ambition. They would quite happily not see anything like this have happened again. Unfortunately, a couple of years later, of course, Edward Snowden emerged and did something even more troublesome from the government's perspective. But I think there is a big question about what's going to be the upshot of this. One of the instant things that I would say is that it's a moment of kind of redemption for the former President Barack Obama, who, for many people, his decision to put then Bradley Manning, now Chelsea Manning, in prison was really very controversial.
Elizabeth, have you been following this story?
I have, yes. I love Chelsea's Instagram. everybody's wondering what the future is going to hold. The future is going to hold big bucks by the looks of it.
It's a film we'd all watch, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think it's being played up that way. It's being played up as this poor, downtrodden woman who is now being freed and can live her life. And some of the phrases she uses seem to be playing into this idea too. I think it's going to make whistleblowing more attractive.
Well, what is the current status of whistleblowing, do you think, Jonathan? Because it's funny to think back to a time when WikiLeaks was cool. I mean,
I was thinking this before. It would be very peculiar if the upshot of the entire WikiLeaks, the huge data dump that Bradley Manning and Julian Assange produced, is actually in the future remembered for a sort of rather unpleasant sexual assault in Sweden and some guy living in the Ecuadorian embassy and a progression in gender relations and transgender rights in the USA. Those weren't the outcomes that they envisaged, I don't suppose, when they leaked those documents.
But actually, the upshot of Chelsea Manning's leaks themselves were very significant. Arguably, they contributed to the emergence of the Arab Spring. Simultaneously, they revealed that civilian casualties in the Iraq War were much higher than the US was reporting. And there was, of course, the famous Apache video that showed US troops attacking from a helicopter and killing 2 Reuters journalists. This wasn't made public, and it came to be a kind of turning point in particularly that the US's military engagement in the Middle East.
But it hasn't really made things more transparent, has it? I mean, that's the thing. If you look at WikiLeaks' influence on contemporary American politics, it's just contributing to the cloud over Hillary Clinton's emails and whether Donald Trump's involved with the Russians and who's influencing what election and data dumps. It's not as if information's free and democratic and everyone knows what's going on. It's more confusing than ever, and the president's able just to say everything's fake.
But that's the point of leaks, isn't it? That they emerge irregularly, and when they do, they can, well, either cause trouble or lead to our greater understanding, a broader, greater understanding about matters that otherwise wouldn't have been so well known. So I suppose we rely on whistleblowers, but it's only ever going to happen irregularly. It's not as if everyone can now just, it's not as if the upshot was everything is declassified now, and nor should it be.
Would you class them as whistleblowers, in inverted quotes? Because they weren't whistleblowing, were they? They saw things that they didn't like, and so they just leaked thousands and thousands and thousands of documents. They weren't blowing the whistle on one particular thing they didn't like. They just said, I don't like any of this. And so they released this huge tranche of documents without caring to cover up names, without caring to cover up any information that could damage military personnel. They didn't care. They just did it because it's what they felt was right.
I'm not sure
regardless.
That is the case with Edward Snowden, who was very clear in why he was leaking the documents that he was, which was that, as far as he was concerned, the NSA was involved in mass surveillance that most people, if they knew about it, would find uncomfortable.
But in Chelsea Manning's case, I mean, we haven't heard her side of the story, and I'm sure we'll all read the book, as I said. But in her case, she did just take everything off a computer, download it onto a data stick, and upload it to WikiLeaks, effectively. So she may have known the content of some of the outrageous things, the killing of the Reuters journalists and everything, but there was over a gigabyte of information there, which she couldn't have plausibly known.
Plus, Edward Snowden, what the NSA was doing, in some ways, was not illegal. There is a precedent being set in the US that telephone calls are not private. You can listen to them. So he mightn't have found it morally correct, but some of what they were doing was not illegal.
I think that is true, but I think that his ambition was in part to generate further conversation around the question of what we're comfortable with, and that certainly was achieved. He did a range of other things that I'm not sure that everyone would be hugely comfortable with, including ending up in Russia with a bunch more information, as far as we understand, that we have no idea about the content of. So it's not wholly clear in either case. I agree that their motivations were 100%, moralistic. But nevertheless, I think that good things happen to come from both cases.
But is the Arab Spring a good thing? Would you say what's happening in the Middle East now, which is all a consequence of the Arab Spring, is good? Syria?
Pithy, simplistic questions, please, Elizabeth. That's a hell of a tangent.
What has happened? You cannot necessarily say that because they leaked this, good things happened. Bad things also happened.
I don't think that's true, and I think both Snowden and Manning, and of course they're very different cases, but I think they would both say that they were interested in influencing the debate itself over a range of different issues. Yes, I'd say Manning's leak was a bit more scattergun, but nevertheless, it did lead to some really positive results. Slow burn as they may be, including, say, the gradual stepping away from the Guantanamo facility that the US has been undergoing. Let's see where that ends up under Trump. But look, the Arab Spring, of course, is intensely complicated, but at least rattling the dictatorial regimes that had been very comfortable across the region was a potential positive effect.
And who to play her in the film? Jared Leto, Eddie Redmayne? Maybe Harry Styles for a left field choice.
Oh, who's that guy who played Doctor Who?
Oh, Matt Smith.
Yeah.
That's a very good choice.
Yeah.
Not American, though. But maybe that would be useful in the promotion of the film.
Did he go to Eton?
Did Matt Smith go to Eton?
Probably. They all did.
No, he didn't. He went to a school in Northampton, I know, because I interviewed him on Radio Northampton. Anyway, let's move on. Jonathan, time for your story of the week, and it's over to our sports desk. Jonathan Harwood, what have we got?
Hello. Could it be over and out for international sport?
The players say they're going to call his bluff. Right? He says, we're not going to pay you if you don't sign this deal. The players say they're going to call his bluff. That the board will stand rock solid behind James Sutherland and those players won't be paid if they don't sign.
This could be a win-win. You say who's got to blink first. Both sides have to negotiate. Cricket Australia said right from the word go, there is our deal. I think it was March 21 it was offered to the players. There has been no discussion or any negotiation on the detail of that deal.
Cricket Australia board member and former player Mark Taylor speaking on the Nine Network's Sports Sunday programme. That was broadcast in Australia, in case you missed the cue there. Jonathan, please tell me this story isn't about rich men asking for more money.
It is on the face of it about that, but I think the wider consequences go far beyond that. But the basics are that key leading Australian cricketers are refusing to sign a new deal with Cricket Australia, who are technically their employers. There's a big row about how money is distributed amongst the game. They're refusing to sign. Now, the upshot of it is that the Ashes could become a bit of a farce with a real second or third string Australian team playing the touring English, which on the face of it would be brilliant.
Great news for us.
Exactly. On the other hand, it raises issues about whether or not these players want to play international cricket, because what they said is that we don't sign this deal, doesn't matter to us, because what we can do is go and play in India, we can play in England, we can play in the Caribbean, we can get big money for doing that, we can get, what you're offering us is nice, it's nice to play for Australia, but financially we don't need to. So the question then is, how important is playing for your nation? And it's a problem, I think, in other sports as well. In football, it's very hard to get players to want to play for their country, especially in international friendlies. You've got issues of nationhood in athletics, that are problem with the plastic Brits. Do they really, these Americans, college students who qualify for Britain through a couple of years of residency, are they really British? Should they have a GB jersey on? You have the same problem in rugby with residency rules, people who just come and live in the country for 2 or 3 years.
Well, let's test this theory, because we have an Aussie in the room, Arion McNicoll, Australian correspondent. Is what Jonathan, sports correspondent, says, is that right, that Aussies wouldn't want to play for their own country in a contractual dispute? It doesn't sound right to me.
Probably greater than in any other field. Australia is proud about its sporting prowess.
Yeah, not just proud, I mean it's literally the news, isn't it? You turn on the news in Australia, half of it is sport.
It's bushfires, sharks and Australians playing sport.
Right. So really, when all's said and done, I mean this is an interesting talking point, when all's said and done,
I think
Australia's not the country that's going to break down international sport, are they? Because they care too much.
No, I'd say so. And I'd say that this is their ambit claim, trying to force the arm of their employers to give them a bit more cash. But at the end of the day, they're not actually going to refuse to play in the Ashes.
And in this country, just going back to the idea of England struggling to recruit for English football, which does seem ridiculous when you actually say it out loud like that. It is the national game. There is so much money and time invested in it. Is that not just because of the money in the clubs and all the rest of it, but actually partly because of our confused sense of national identity? Because I feel, and I'm not a sport fan, but I do feel just that little bit more comfortable about supporting Team GB at the Olympics than I do about supporting England at football.
Yeah, totally. I mean, if Wilfried Zaha is a good example. He was born in the Ivory Coast, moved to England as a youngster, grew up in the Crystal Palace academy. He was a really good young player, played twice for England, couldn't get in the team anymore, and therefore decided to go and start playing again for Ivory Coast. Now, it's that kind of amorphous idea that you can switch and change your allegiance, which is very prevalent in football. I think more prevalent in football perhaps than other sports. No one cares about England playing in international friendlies in football anymore. I mean, Wembley would be half empty. The games are universally bad. And everyone would much rather watch a Champions League match between, Manchester United and some team from Germany you've barely heard of than watch England.
But I sort of wonder whether that comes from the fans being a bit sort of at arm's length with their own clubs. 100 years ago, club football would have been all about a group of people from a certain area playing for that area against people from different areas. And so you'd have that real sense of location. And now your average team, particularly in the Premier League, by and large is constituted of international players and probably not many British players at all. So people don't even have that connection from sort of club to international. There just isn't that sense of identity. Is there anymore?
Yeah, well, I mean, the club has a more identity as well. I mean, the club, Manchester United, is a much bigger brand than English FA. People in Japan and China all support Man United. They don't give a stuff about England.
Okay, you've been listening to three men talk about sport for the last 3 minutes, and we're not that kind of podcast. You can hear we're all far too polite. Elizabeth, you've been sitting quietly. What would you like to say about this?
I think it's just a load of overpaid men who now really don't give a damn about the country because they get paid a lot. Thank you very much. And that's it. You see it when you watch England play. It's dire. They don't care about the Three Lions anymore. They're going to be paid nicely. Thank you. That's it. They don't seem to have the passion that, for example, Scotland does. Scotland plays terribly. They give it everything they've got. England have some of the best paid players in the world. Don't give a damn.
I sometimes wonder if England aren't rubbish enough. The Scots, they can all get behind their national team because they're so terrible that it's kind of like, it taps into that British sense of being the underdog, whereas England are just so mediocre that it's just difficult to get excited in either direction.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously the sort of visceral enjoyment of tearing the team to pieces when they when they fall apart at an international tournament like at the last World Cup.
Yeah, but it's never terrible, is it? It's just always just like bad.
Yeah.
If they're terrible, you'd be like, we're a small country.
Losing to Iceland was pretty bad.
Okay.
And good fun as well, though. Everyone quite enjoyed that in a funny sort of way. And as a result, there was a sort of probably an uptick of interest in the English national team for a bit. When they're drawing 0-0 with Romania, then no one really even knew it was happening.
You know what the answer might be, Elizabeth, to restore some pride into the national game?
Which is?
Crowdfunding. Let's all put our money where our mouth is. Let's support a better England.
I think that would be great because then you could get people who really, really love their country and want to represent them in sports like gymnastics, for example, getting paid a little bit more, getting a bit more focus on TV. Great. Get cricket off TV, get gymnastics on, get synchronised swimming on, get dressage on.
But the badminton team being crowdfunded to go to Tokyo, that's good. Okay. Elizabeth Consistent Carr-Ellis there. Thank you for your contribution to this episode of The Week Unwrapped. My thanks as well to Jonathan Harwood and Arion McNicoll. For more from The Week, why not visit theweek.co.uk. You can download our free iPhone app, The Weekday, or, of course, you can get the magazine direct to your door. Just head to theweek.co.uk/subscribe. And remember that you can subscribe to this podcast as well. All you need to do is press the subscribe button in your podcast app of choice. Just search for The Week Unwrapped. Actually, full title is The Week Unwrapped with Olly Mann. I insisted on that. I've been Olly Mann. Our music is by Tom Morby, the producer Matt Hill at Rethink Audio. Until we meet again to unwrap next week, bye-bye.